All right, please sit down if you're in the room. We want you seated so that you can fully participate and enjoy where we're going from here. So the next 3 sessions are going to be looking at the way in which entrepreneurship has been programmatically developed at MIT with all of the institutions that have come to the fore since 1990. And we have sitting on the stage the representatives of many of those institutions. And we are then going to go and talk about how we have then broadcast to the rest of the world what we have done here and engaged in many other countries to help them stimulate their own economies and their own entrepreneurship. And then we will talk more broadly, generally, about the wide variety of MIT alumni who are accelerating the process of entrepreneurship and how they are going about doing it. So that's our afternoon agenda. We will then take another break, and then we'll start serious drinking before what we hope is going to be a lovely dinner. And we're going to be here on this floor and in this room through that whole time. So let me introduce the chair of our first afternoon session. Scott Stern is a sterling academic in the field of innovation and entrepreneurship. He first came here as an assistant professor during our early years of being permitted to hire anybody into this place. And then he left us to go to Northwestern. Northwestern, unfortunately for us, managed to quickly promote him, give him tenure, and lock him in, they thought. But we were not giving up without a fight, and consequently, with significant efforts on our part, we attracted Scott to come back to MIT, where he has taken a very important leadership role in further building the entrepreneurship program at MIT. Scott at the moment is in Netherlands on sabbatical, but he has come home for the purpose of this session. Scott, welcome home, and thank you for taking over the session.
Thank you so much, Ed. And I'm going to comment on that, and I'm going to a few of you were at the academic sessions this morning, but I'm going to retell a piece of that for Ed's benefit mostly, which is he brought up this point that I was a junior faculty member here. I was very influenced. I'm an economist by background and training, and I publish primarily in economics journals. Ed took a huge chance on bringing me here along with other colleagues from the TIES group and from the strategy group. And when I was here, I was immersed in really trying to understand innovation and increasingly entrepreneurship. I was then at Northwestern for 8 years, and I love Northwestern, so I see Jim Utterback, a Northwestern grad there. And I had, when I was there, I taught on the same evening as a practitioner faculty who taught our main entrepreneurship course. And he and I had a fantastic relationship. We never disagreed on anything. We had an hour together many weeks a year when we were teaching a class. He taught in one classroom, I taught in another, basically 2 complementary classes, and our conversations were always in agreement. We agreed the weather was poor or nice, that the traffic had been bad or not so bad, and that the Cubs probably didn't have a chance. That was, and when I came back to MIT in 2009, and I was thinking about coming back more permanently, I was really struck by, I think, something that Ed really talked about earlier today. I really want to thank Bill, I think, for his efforts continuously in this regard, Fiona, so on and so forth, that was really about bringing academic and practitioner faculty into the same classrooms in a rigorous way. And then as I sort of extended that over time, I ended up, this is a panel of people throughout the MIT ecosystem, and each of these people runs a different organization or has been involved in those organizations in many ways, and, right, both from a faculty perspective and so on and so forth. And yet we all know each other and have had mostly agreement, but also occasional moments where we might disagree. Because we're trying to do the kind of hard problem solving and impact and actually, right, trying to move things forward and set an environment for entrepreneurship and impact at MIT that both can make this ecosystem better and also guide future action and for others. So we are really, I think, fortunate to have the people who are with us on this panel this afternoon. They're just 4 real leaders of the MIT ecosystem. They each will describe their own activities and the organizations that they've kind of nurtured and grown over the past. And as well, their ability to develop courses, develop research, develop activities that then complement those institutional initiatives. I'm not going to, I will introduce them one by one as each of them speak. What we're going to do is kind of have a series of short remarks to begin with, and then I'm going to ask 1 or 2 questions, and then we'll kind of open it up for some broader questions. So we're going to start, most of you know her, but with Lita Nelson from our, no longer, right now, a sort of citizen of the world, but sort of from our technology licensing.
Those who don't know me, I was with the technology licensing for 30 years, since 1986, and I think that may be relevant to the time scale that Ed gave us. If you look at entrepreneurship as it's seen from MIT, I think one aspect that people don't quite understand is that we're really doing 2 very different things that overlap. And one of them is teaching entrepreneurship and, of course, studying it as an academic discipline, but also very much a la Bill Aulette, as a laboratory in which people learn entrepreneurship by doing it. And MIT has expanded that further with Sandbox, et cetera. But the other thing that we do, which the Technology Licensing Office is focused on, is how do we take the results of our scientific and engineering research and midwife it out into the community. And it's the Technology Licensing Office, does it based on development and establishment of intellectual property such that the intellectual property can provide an incentive, because of the protection it offers, to industry and or mostly, it turns out, venture investment in very early stage, very risky technology. And many biotech companies, many materials companies, the kinds of technology where someone's going to have to invest tens or more likely hundreds of millions of dollars to bring it to market. That's the other part of MIT's entrepreneurship that it's been well known for. I want to make a comment about, for those of you who were there and those who weren't, the very generous recognition that the first panel here gave to the TLO in terms of our willingness to help people crawl into the massive database from which people like Scott can do and Fiona can do research. We're generous because we were allowed to be generous. That MIT, at the upper administration, the emphasis on the Technology Licensing Office is not how much money you can make. It's impact, not income. They have occasionally made quite a bit of money, but it's not the purpose. This is very different from tech transfer offices mostly around the world. Very few people understand that. But because of that, we could, and now Leslie can, do what's right for MIT, not what maximizes the income of the office. And it's that understanding of what technology transfer is about at the very upper administration of MIT that has made the huge difference.
That is a very, very good starting point. And this notion, for those of you who don't appreciate it, this notion that the Technology Licensing Office, that is seen by many as one of the most financially successful in the world,
comes and goes, like all of that.
That has as its core mission impact, is I think something we should keep in mind as we also listen to some of the further on comments. Our second panelist is Sherwin Greenblatt, who really has been the nurturer and founder and grower of the venture mentoring service. So Sherwin.
Thanks, Scott. So I was born and raised in Chicago on the north side. This is a miracle year for me. It really is. I saw pigs fly and hell froze over. Anyway.
And you went skating.
So let me talk about where I'm coming from. I'm an alum who worked with my professor to start a company. That was Dr. Amar Bose. And we started Bose Corporation. I became the first employee. For the first year, I was the only employee. I wish I had more time. I could tell you some interesting stories, but I'll give you the one paragraph story. A very difficult start with some great ideas. Didn't come easily, but after a while, we figured it out. We figured out how to make products, how to conceive, how to make, how to deliver products, how to market and sell products, and the company was very successful. That was my career. For most of my career there, I was one of the leaders of the company. So about 12 years ago, 13 years ago, I retired. I had done everything I could for Bose Corporation. It was a great corporation, still is today. And talked with a colleague of mine who had just started this program at MIT. His name's Alec Dingy, and basically he wanted to give back. He was a serial entrepreneur, Sloan grad, wanted to give back, and didn't find what was good for him in the activities that were going on in those days. That was in 2000 when he started, and felt that there was something missing at MIT, which was a mentoring component that would work with people for as long as they needed help, and so proposed what became the Venture Mentoring Service. He worked with his a colleague, Dave Stalin, who was a tenured professor in electrical engineering, computer science, also a serial entrepreneur, and the two of them conceived of this volunteer mission. And basically what we do is we serve all members of the MIT community. It's students, of course, undergrad, grad students, but it's also faculty, it's MIT staff, or alumni, all within the greater Boston area. And the whole idea is that within that community, there are people who get ideas, who become passionate about their ideas, but because our training is largely in engineering and science, we don't have a clue about what to do. And so the idea is to take people who have been out in the entrepreneurial world, who have been there, done it, ask them to volunteer their time, come back in, and to work with these individuals to help them develop the skills, the knowledge, the judgment, the self-confidence, so that they can embark on a path to becoming successful entrepreneurs. And as we developed the program, the idea was to work with these people for as long as they needed us. So unlike many of the activities that you'll hear about today, they're episodic. They come, you do them, they help you, maybe they give you Delta V or something like that, and then they're done and you go on to the next thing. We provide the base of continuity both while people are in school and then after they leave, and we work with them for as long as is needed. It's an unbelievably satisfying thing to volunteer to do, and we have about 150 volunteers serving about 250 startup ventures within the MIT community. So it's become a big deal. So that's what we do. Just let me look to the future and talk about what we want to do as we look ahead. Two things. One is we recognize that what we've done so far has been kind of opportunistic. We wait for people to come to us and say, I want to start a venture, will you help us? But MIT as an institution has an enormous amount of research that goes on, and much of that research is never commercialized because there's no one who says, I want to start a venture. And so one of the things that we're working with is a program called Translational Fellow Program, where we take individuals, postdocs now, who have a chance of becoming entrepreneurial. We take research that looks like it might conceivably be commercializable, and we take the intersection of those two, and we work, we award translational fellow awards to individuals to help them spend time commercializing their research. And that's particularly important today because MIT has just announced the Engine. It's a program outside of MIT that is designed to take difficult to develop technologies and provide a home for them to develop until they can stand on their own. Well, where do those things come from? We think the Translational Fellow Program will be able to feed the Engine with some very, very meaningful MIT research results. So very exciting thing that we're undertaking. Second thing I wanted to briefly talk about is a program that has actually been going on within venture mentoring for a fair amount of time. It's what we call our outreach program. So about 10 years ago, we were approached by the Kaufman Foundation, which is the foundation for entrepreneurship in this country, and they said, we think the MIT program is one of the best in the country, they said, at connecting the academic world and the business world. And so we see you have a good program here, we'd like you to spread it. And with their encouragement, grants too, that always helps, we developed what we call an outreach program where we teach others to adapt what we've done at MIT to their needs and to run mentoring programs modeled after what we do here. Today we have over 60, I think 64 programs running around the world. We're on every continent but Antarctica. We're looking for an opportunity there. There you go. And we found that the idea that we have and run here at MIT works in many, many different places. And we find areas where you wouldn't believe there could be success in entrepreneurship using the concept to develop their local economies. So we're also very excited about doing that as well.
Great. No, thank you very much. And I think one of the things which I'll come back to is, I think, both in Lita's work with technology licensing, as well as certainly with venture mentoring, as well as every piece that we're going to hear. One of the things is that MIT is, I think, a place that both does things and then serves as an exemplar of things, of those things that sort of bubble up and seem to be having an impact. And that kind of Dave Schmidtline mentioned yesterday that we are a place where ideas are made to matter, and I think your remarks really kind of reinforce that. Our third panelist is Leon Sandler, who is the executive director or managing director of the Deshpande Center, and so I'm going to leave it to you, Leon.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Scott. For those of you who know me, I am going to keep these remarks to 7 minutes, believe it or not. He's laughing. So let me just jump right in here. So what does the Deshpande Center do? Well, firstly, I want to acknowledge Charlie Cooney, who's sitting in the back. Charlie was the founding faculty director of the Deshpande Center and really got this whole program up and going about 14 years ago and was involved with us up until 2 years ago. So our focus at MIT is a little bit unique. It's not education primarily. Our focus is on taking technologies that are in the labs at MIT and moving them out into the marketplace. That's our core mission. The secondary mission is really on educating faculty and students and postdocs on the process of how you commercialize technologies. So if you think of technological innovation, there's a spectrum from design to engineering-based innovation to research-based innovation. And where we focus is really on the side of research-based innovation and a little bit of engineering-based innovation. That's very, very hard to do, but it has a huge impact in society. So that's the focus of the center. I'm an engineer, so like all good engineers around here, we always think of what's the problem we're trying to solve. So the problem, and Lita talked about this a little bit, for every dollar you spend at MIT, you're going to have to spend 10 to 100 times that in a commercial venture to really produce your first product. Someone has to make that investment, and there's three things they look at. First is obviously the team. But hey, it's at MIT, and with the help of Bill and others, we can pull together a good team. The other two things are technology risk and market risk. So the investors want to know that if they put $10 or $20 million into this venture, it's not a science experiment. They need to know that the technology risk is reasonable. that there's a chance you could actually achieve the metrics you require. And the other side of it is market risk. If you can finally build this thing or this product or this service, is there going to be a market for it? So we're in the risk reduction business. We work with projects at MIT, these are pre-company formation, to help them reduce technology risk and reduce market risk to the point where they can spin out and raise funding. Also, Lita talked about this with technology. The reality is most university technologies that get commercialized are not going to be licensed to a large company. It's going to happen through a startup. That's just the experience. So although nothing in our mission said entrepreneurship, the reality is we're also in the entrepreneurship business because we're helping foster startups. So what do we actually do at the center? We do, we like to say we select, we direct, and we connect. Firstly, we give out money. So we're a granting agency. We provide small grants, $50,000 up to $250,000 over a multi-year period, basically to faculty and to their students to fund research, to fund that work that's going to reduce technology risk, and we also work with them to understand the market to reduce market risk. And we have a number of programs that they go through. We have, similar to VMS, but slightly different focus, we have a large pool of mentors. Our mentors tend to be much more technically oriented. They have industry-specific knowledge, and they can work with these teams, and so we will help direct them over a 1 to 3 year period and also connect them to the marketplace. We work very closely with other groups at MIT, VMS, Trust Center, the TLO, the Industrial Liaison Program, the innovation teams class, energy ventures, new enterprises, to really try and work collaboratively to help move these people along. In fact, earlier today, I was looking around the room. I don't see them here. I saw 2 of the CEOs of our spin-outs who were both actually Sloan Fellows who met the teams in the I-Teams class and actually spun out companies and have both done quite well. Quick summary of sort of some metrics for results. So we've been doing this about 14 years. And during that period, we've, reviewed maybe 600-700 proposals for money. We've given out about 130 grants of over $15 million to different project teams around MIT involving hundreds of faculty and students. So far, of those projects, 33 have spun out. It's about a 25% rate, raising in excess of $650 million. And I will stop there. And I think I did that in 5.5 minutes.
Everyone is doing great here. We're on time, under budget. Okay, and our final panelist is a very distinguished faculty member from the Media Lab that many of you know, Sandy Pentland, who could discuss many things, I'm sure, and his many activities, but I think he's going to focus here on those that relate specifically to entrepreneurship.
Okay, good. So 18 years ago, the IT minister of India asked me to set up a series of laboratories at the IITs in India because what was happening at that point is everybody who graduated immediately left India. And what he wanted to see is he wanted to see more of them stay and more of them focus on the problems of India. So I agreed to do that. It's a very interesting experience. The labs I set up are still working. They mostly service handicapped, blind, disabled people. And as part of that, I set up a parallel program here because I thought the invention that you see here, the students you see here ought to be integrally involved in this. And so set up this thing called Development Entrepreneurship with Joost Bonsen. And we began doing sort of the MIT thing, which is invention, design, putting people together to be able to find things that would serve underserved populations around the world. And we discovered a couple of things that were bugs. One bug was that people tended to do philanthropic things. They said, oh, my uncle's from this little village. I'm going to do something that helps this village. Wait a second, this is MIT. If we can't help the world, who is it? Not one village. And so we put the challenge in to all the students. You have to come up with a business plan that touches 1 billion people. It doesn't have to be for profit, but you have to tell me where the money comes from and why it's scalable. And we prefer strongly that it be the people that are serviced to be the ones that pay for it, not philanthropy. And at that time, this was extremely controversial. But I noticed that, for instance, the development labs and things like that over the years have been converted to this view that entrepreneurship is a good thing and not a bad thing. So we've continued on with that for these many years. Nobody has actually touched 1 billion people, but several of them come close in health, in internet connectivity, things like that. We've touched over 1,000 students in that one class and had on the order of about 100 spin-outs from that are in various stages over the years. Perhaps more importantly, we've attracted a lot of other students and a lot of other faculty. So we now regularly get people from Sloan School, from engineering, from Harvard, particularly the schools of public health, education, from Wellesley, from all sorts of people who come. And so like I said, we have 12 classes. Just sort of rough envelope thing is we have touched 4,000 students at this point, which is a pretty good number. And what we specialize in is what I call sort of pre-napkin stage. Helping people ask, do I really want to be an entrepreneur? What does this mean? What can I do here that will have an impact on the world? So it's, sometimes I describe it as brainwashing, but it's really sort of a self-reflection, how do I find people, topics that have impact, something that really fits my life, and how am I going to move forward with this? And so it's very satisfying from that point of view. I think a lot of the people that you heard up here, that Bill has helped so much and the other pro-despondent has helped so much, are often got an initial seed in these classes that we do. And that it's great that the ecosystem around MIT supports them and allows it to grow. And I'll just stop there.
Okay, very, very good. So I'm going to ask 1 or 2 questions first, and then we'll throw it out to everybody. So the first question I had was, and Lita and I were talking about this earlier this morning, but it really is, one of the things that I think is striking about MIT is that, to put it bluntly, no one's in charge, right? There are many people in charge of many things, but there are also many, many things. And one of the things that I think has been something I have observed is that, certainly relative to when I was here as a junior faculty member, but even in the last 7 or 8 years, to understand how MIT has really, I think, come together a bit more as an ecosystem in a meaningful way. Not every problem has been solved, not every boundary is understood, but there is a sense of there being an ecosystem. And I guess maybe it'd be good to hear just briefly of just sort of how do you think about where the organization, your organization, which part of the ecosystem was your particular orange grove trees, and where's the next one?
I have in the TLO, the progression has been opposite from the whole system in a very good way. In the early days, before VMS, before the Entrepreneurship Center, before the Despondee Center, it was the TLO staff, and I hired gray hair. I hired people with strong technology basis education, but who had also spent 15 or 20 years in industry, not at the bench. And given it was Boston area, a lot of them, some of them from MIT, many of them had been involved in startups at one point in their career or another. So in addition to doing the evaluation of hundreds of disclosures a year, poor Leslie now has over 850 a year coming into the TLO. They were also able to provide a lot of advice of how to get started, even disputes between faculty and grad students, who to talk to, pointing them in directions of where they might get money, but also helping them say, look, this won't work because. But it was done as a sort of a hobby. It wasn't adequate, but it was better than nothing. As these systems developed, Deshpande, Entrepreneurship Center, even the student business plan contest, if I had a faculty member with a platform technology and didn't know whether it was going to be good for shining shoes or making hearing aids, well, it wasn't that, it was automobiles or making hearing aids. But I'd send them off to the student business plan contest. Didn't matter whether they won or not. It was the fact that they had to get their act together of a proposal and a strategy to market, whatever. So what's happened is all those little things, not that we invented them, a lot of it was just need staring you in the face, that MIT was able to have these bottom-up ideas that grew them from a very part-time volunteer work of the TLO into an integrated system.
So it's true, no one's in charge. In fact, spending some time here, what I've discovered is that every tenured faculty member here thinks they're in charge.
I know, I've been disabused of that.
Thinks. But, you know, those of us who are leading these programs, we're entrepreneurs, we're entrepreneurial. And it doesn't take long when you think about the people that we're working with is that they're entrepreneurs, or at least entrepreneurs to be also. Entrepreneurs don't let anything stand in the way of their goals. That's what makes them good entrepreneurs. So I think we recognize that they're not going to say, I'm going to deal only here or only here, and I'm captive and whatnot. And so what we've come to do is we've come to work together as an informal group to make sure that we're coordinated, make sure that we don't overlap or fight with each other, and then to encourage all of the entrepreneurs that we work with to take advantage of every single thing that they can. Don't do one thing, do them all. And if one isn't serving you, get rid of it and do something else. And so that's why we find the same entrepreneurs who come to each of our organizations, work with us, and the only thing I can say is the ones that come back must be getting something from what we offer.
Yeah, I think just to echo what Shu had said, and hadn't thought about it this way, is that if you look at these different organizations at MIT, they are run by highly entrepreneurial people. I'd say none of us are really bureaucrats. But what we each do, and I'll speak for the Deshpande Center, but I think it's the same for the others, we each have something we do well within our sphere. So we have the thing we do, but we have a lot of interfaces to the other groups. So we'll bring people in, we'll do our thing, but we'll pass them off to Bill, to Shu, and to anybody we can around MIT, because we see a big piece of our function being providing that connection. You know, even at the center, we have faculty who come to us that we're not giving grants, or faculty we've turned down from grants, and we still help them and pass them around. And I think that's sort of the unique piece. We all work very well together here.
Sandy, any thoughts?
So you asked what sort of orange tree. So I think the thing that's happened is that there's a number of sort of extraordinary unofficial people around MIT that sometimes get somewhat official. So Joost Bonson's one, Amy Smith is another. I mean, these are people that didn't originally have any position at all, but they're very tapped into the informal system. So like the 100K. That's a student-run thing. There's all these clubs and other sorts of things that actually provide an enormous amount of support, of contact, of reach. And so I like to think of what we're doing as giving them a place to hang out and be part of it. And it's suitable also for what the sort of pre-napkin stage that I'm talking about. There's a community. Yep. We're trying to hook you up to the community so that you can think what you're doing, and then there's all these other choices you can do through the more official things.
You know, I think it's quite remarkable that the extent to which this community is very different from what you see most places where we would be turf fighting. There's something about the ethic of this place that says you don't have to turf fight. You're good enough on your own turf. That somehow has carried across campus in a remarkable way.
You know, and I think sometimes. Oh, did you want to? Push.
You want to finish?
No. Well, I was gonna. Yeah, I'll finish. Is just building on that, one of the things I think is that as you see new initiatives, you know, and the engine was mentioned as a very new initiative that has okay, exactly. No, but as you see each additional thing being added, I think one of the things is that, you know, in entrepreneurship, right, there's a certain sense in which success is the absence of failure, right? That's, you know, a Paul Graham quote that I like, is that there really are many, many ways that high potential businesses can fail. And one of the things that I think I have observed is the kind of layering of support structures. And so each, you know, as we kind of realize, you know, at one point, and I agree with that, you know, going back to what Sandy was saying, and I think the important work of D-Lab and other initiatives was that there was like a fundamental just, how do you even get started? As a student who wants to help emerging economy, where do you even start, right? That kind of right? And even the other kinds of classes as well. There were issues in Despande around pure, right, about how do you take things from the lab into hardcore science? Where's the mentoring piece? How do we navigate these IP pieces? And, you know, everything in between, and obviously with the Trust Center around entrepreneurial education. And I guess the one thing that I would then kind of emphasize is that by that scaffolding, right, and each, you know, we now recognize there seems to be a challenge in scaling hardcore science-based businesses, right? A lot of people have identified that in data as both examples, but also in large-scale data, and I think that that's going to be a nurturing place for that type of activity.
And also remember that MIT has been we interact with the outside environment, ecosystem, and they interact with us. So that the layering includes the outside.
That was the point I wanted to make. We need to recognize that as part of this Kendall Square miracle that we've heard about, there is an ecosystem out there of support for entrepreneurship that our internal entrepreneurs more and more are able to take advantage of.
We could have easily had Tim Rowe on this panel.
Exactly.
We could have easily had, you know what I'm saying?
So,
you know,
so there's a whole lot more, and that's also growing at a great rate.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
So one of the things I was going to say, which is interesting about the culture, is I'll call this a prototyping culture. So even within our organizations, if there's something we come up with that we feel like trying, we just do it. So this is, I mean, I would say maybe the exception being the engine, which is a very big initiative top down. Most of the things, we come up with something we want to do, Sherwin comes up with something, or Bill comes up with something, we just try it. You know, last week, Ed had a class, which is the second year we've done it, this hackathon between School of Engineering, Science. We brought some Despande teams together. To be honest with you, the first year it happened, it may not have been as good. It's getting better and better, but you can try things. If they work, they work. If they don't work, they don't work, and that's how a lot of this new stuff comes about.
Any thoughts, Sandy, before I turn it out?
Well, I guess to sort of point to the deficit side of things, I often feel like it's difficult to move around in the Boston area. Like, I wish it was really easy to get over to the hospital area. In fact, actually, to get over there and collaborate with somebody on health technology, it's like an hour and a half each way. It's crazy, right? And there's some other things like that that are sort of physical infrastructure more than anything else that would help the community grow in an interesting way.
It was so nice to see Tom Allen at the reception last night, and Tom, of course, was a pioneer, you know, and I always remember, you know, trying to summarize Tom Allen's research to a doctoral student or something. I said, if you have to walk through 3 doors, they might as well be in Tokyo, right? You know what I'm saying, right? You know, right. And that's not quite right, but it's essentially right, that we can use our physical spaces I think that some of the work around makerspaces that's going on around on campus, and I think as Bill mentioned, even just having a little bit of a kind of, not a real maker, not a hardcore makerspace, but enough to do some prototyping that's been integrated into the new design of the Trust Center. Trying to figure out how people, because you're not going to stop people, but they also, it has to be feasible for them, for a real person to do it, who doesn't have a lot of time, who doesn't have a lot of resources, and is ambitious, but also has a lot of other things to do. Okay, why don't we take a few questions? I have many questions, but here, Michael.
Look, I was intrigued by the remark that if it's not working for you, get rid of it and get something else. Because the MIT engine is a source of patient capital.
Yeah.
And at some point, one must decide that you are impatient. So talk about that, if you would, please. When do you stop being patient, or do you not stop? And do you mentor somebody who you had an initial bet on because there was something there, and whatever the tripwire or the barrier is, you're going to work through it, and you're not going to get rid of it?
So I'm not sure, is Raman Ananda, so MIT student, Raman Ananda, who is now recently tenured at the Harvard Business School, has done a very important line of research that he really started here at MIT on thinking about this process of that successful scaling of any venture takes a lot of steps, right? Certainly in an area like clean energy, something like biotech, for a big thing. But if you don't feel like there's going to be, people are going to take a bet in the future, people won't even let you start today. And I think that one of the things that we see in the development of more patient capital is a wanting to create an environment where those ventures which are going to take a little bit longer time to let the string play out a little bit more, bet on the team and a core technology without knowing the application at first. And I think that there's some good evidence that there has been a challenge in financing at the earliest stages the translation of those types of ventures. And that's some empirical, kind of econometric evidence, but I'd be interested how you guys
So we're faced with this all the time. We provide mentoring services for as long as people need us. Well, how long is that? So two things. So one guideline is if people are working diligently at whatever it is and they're making progress and our input is helping them, we will stay with them. If we see no progress or disinterest or whatever, we just withdraw our services. We say we can't help you anymore. And it does come to that sometime. But there are people that are working diligently and that are making progress. It just takes a long, long time. So in our experience, now we've been at this since 2000, so we have 16 years of experience. In our experience, our biggest successes, and we've had some good-sized successes, they've taken 6 or 8 years that we've been working with them before they finally turned it and were really successful. So we can work with them, but the whole ecosystem has to provide a 6 or 8 year path. And I think that's what we're struggling with now.
An accelerator.
Think about that.
Think about it. A traditional accelerator program, even if you love accelerators, is a 3-month program. And then all of a sudden you have to go up into venture capital and pitch.
And the engine maybe is a 1-year program. Right. How are we going to provide the other 7 years?
I think everyone wants to talk, so I'm going to start with Sandy and we'll come on down.
Yeah, so just in general, as a personal thing, when I start a company, it's usually one of these longer range things like personal privacy, better mental health services, top to bottom. 6 or 7 years would be fast, right? So what you also have to do, and I think it's something MIT can do, is raise these sorts of questions up as important policy questions. We actually have a voice that can be heard at the highest levels. And if we believe that something will have enormous impact, maybe not this particular thing, but things in this area, we should raise that up as a critical thing that countries need to think about that.
Okay, so I want to really split this into 2 parts, and the one is pre-company formation and then post-company formation. So if I look at a lot of the stuff that's come through the Deshpande Center, these things post-company can take, 5, 7, 10 years to really have good revenues. So there's a long, long time, and they will need patient capital. But let me talk about what we do on the pre-company side. So we are extremely tough. I would say to the point of ruthlessness that people have to make progress. We will take very high-risk bets at the beginning. We'll give somebody $50,000. There's maybe a 10% chance they can accomplish something technically. But if they don't hit their milestones within a year, it's over. And that's what we found is you have to be extremely tough, or you can have these sort of living dead things. There's always, faculty will always come back to you and say, that didn't work, but let me tell you, now I've got a new idea, and the answer is you had your chance. So I think you have to be kind of tough, hold people's feet to the fire. I mean, some of them will dramatically exceed expectations, but those that don't are good research projects. Go back to the lab, continue with research. When you've got some good results, come back and talk to us.
Well, it's a tough thing in technology licensing offices because patents have a certain lifetime, 20 years from when you file. If you're in the real world, you keep your mouth shut for a few years and file 3 years from the invention. But if you're going to publish next week, which takes priority and should, you got to file this week. Then the issue is how long can the technology licensing office keep supporting that patent, because there's a limited patent budget. And when do you give up? Or when do you cut the expenses and not quite give up yet? And there again, one of the important parameters is this something that somebody thought was a good idea, put under its pillow, and someday we'll work on it? Or is this something that the potential entrepreneur is really putting her heart into and ain't gonna give up no matter what you do? Exactly. And that's enormous part of it. Let me jump in for a minute to explain something that Sherwin said, which is this technology that comes out of our research is not gonna get licensed, or maybe it was, did you say it? Not gonna get licensed to large companies. It will, but not until it's ripened. And so the problem with the technology as you see it in Science magazine from our labs is that it's too early, it's too risky, it takes too much time to market, and worst of all, its time to market is too long, such that your champion within a large corporation will have another job by the time it reaches the market. As a result, universities have to find ways to ripen the technology. And within Kendall Square and in Silicon Valley, the most straightforward ripening system is the risk capital of angel and venture investors and the passion and skill of the entrepreneurial team. But elsewhere in the world, people are going to have to find different ways to ripen the technology. And that's one of the great puzzles.
Yeah. Very good. We have time for probably one more question, right over here. See, if you sit right in the middle, that's what I'm looking at.
Well, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. First of all, my name is Terry Chelle. First, I would like to give a quick shout out to Professor Ed Roberts for creating the Management of Technology program, which I'm a proud member of the 1998 class. So I want to share a kind of a quick observation, and I'd love to see the panel's take on it. So the way I look at the MIT entrepreneurship environment, it's very much driven by core competence. We all work on the things we know about. And that kind of created this ecosystem. And then if you look at the Silicon Valley, to me, it's mostly driven by, private sector venture capitalists. It's driven by financial gains. we hear the quotes like, we asked you to change the world, but we got 160 characters.
Only 140.
140 characters. Gotta work on my math. And then if I look at the Chinese entrepreneur ecosystem, it's very much driven by trends. The investors are willing to invest in something hot. And if something's hot, you get hundreds, if not thousands or hundreds of thousands companies created, even though they know the expected return is going to be less. So I want to kind of see whether the panel think that's true at all, first of all. Second of all, whether there's a particular model that you believe is the most sustainable.
Okay, in the less than 3 minutes we have left, we're not going to be able to fully evaluate that question. Let me do one thing and maybe go down real quickly here, which is to say, do you think that MIT has done a good job, or how could we do better? Let me put, if that's okay. How could we do better to invest in our comparative advantage? How can we do better to leverage the uniqueness that we already have and make that even stronger? I know that's maybe a hard question, but it's a final question. So, Sandy, do you want to try? I know you have any number of thoughts of what we should do.
Well, one thing that is striking is how difficult it is, just the physical infrastructure in an area like this with extremely high rents. Everything's built up. One of the things that you get in Silicon Valley is you used to be able at least to spread out. Kendall Square is hideously expensive and crowded. So we don't have that spreading out stuff. And I'm not sure what to do about that, but it's a problem.
Yeah. So one is really thinking hard. And obviously Sandy's work as well as others around smart city initiatives, smart civic infrastructure. How we use space is something that I know Fiona is thinking hard about. Others are thinking really hard about throughout the Institute.
Yeah, I'd say, if you look at the programs that are working well, but that are resource constrained and could do more if they had more resources, that's sort of an obvious one.
Yep.
I mean, what's actually fairly unique about MIT, and I'll speak for Deshpande, and probably this applies to VMS as well, is we're basically self-funding organizations. We don't get any money from the Institute. We're the only one like us that I know of in the world that operates that way. Most are funded by either the university or the government. And so I think to the extent that there are more resources that can be brought to bear, that allows you to do more.
So we talked about what's unique at MIT, and I think it's two categories. One is the people that are here, outstanding people, state-of-the-art, working at state-of-the-art in many cases, thinking at state-of-the-art, surely. So that's one resource. But the other is the work that they do, the research work and whatnot that's turned out. I think we need to focus on how we can bring those two things together and push those to commercialization. There's already ideas, already work on the shelf that could make phenomenal impact on the world. We need to figure out how to bring that work to fruition. We're doing a little bit of it. I think we can do more. We need to put more resources into that.
It all starts with basic research. That's what holds this place together.
That's true.
I think if you want to ask what I think MIT needs to do, it needs to put enormous senior resources into articulating to the American public and the new administration how important keeping up investment in the future in fundamental research is. And MIT is big enough to make a difference.
Okay, with that sounds like a nice inspirational quote. Very good. I want to thank this great panel. And Ed is going to tell us.
Thank you very much, Scott.